Welcome everyone to our conversation about the future of marketing and of mobile marketing specifically. I am Rohit Bhargava. I'm the trend curator at the Non-Obvious Company, and I'm the author of Non-Obvious Megatrends. And we're going to do something a little bit different today. In fact, I'm very, very excited about it. It is going to be a first-time experiment this time. But instead of doing kind of the usual talk about trends and opportunities that I might do at many other events, I am very, very fortunate and very honored to be joined by two amazing professionals who are going to be able to talk about this in a panel style discussion. So Nathania and Acacia, I am very, very excited to have you join me. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi,
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You are very welcome. And for people who are not familiar with your backgrounds, you are both part of a very, very renowned organization called Trendwatching, which some of you may know the organization more than the faces behind it or the thinking behind it. But we are very, very lucky to have the both of you here to talk about some of the research that you publish all the time at trendwatching.com. And there's lots of reports there, and you help I don't even know how many hundreds of corporations around the world, but you are in many, many places. I know that both of you are actually based in Singapore, but you travel, well, you used to travel to many places across the world. I imagine that's sort of slowed down now, as it has for me as well. And I'm sitting here based in Washington, D.C. And so we have a view of many different places. We talk about trends all the time. And this is going to be a fascinating discussion because we're going to zone in on a couple of trends that we think, when we were doing the preparation and kind of thinking about and preparing for this session, that we think are going to be hugely relevant for mobile marketers as we move into the rest of 2020 and 2021 in a world that's totally shifted, and arguably a world where perhaps mobile marketing has become even more important because of how attached we are to these things, even though we don't go that many places. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about a sort of behind the scenes look also, which I'm very, very excited about, at how trend curation happens. So how do I and how do my two fellow panelists here think about trends and spot and curate these ideas that really other people could see but don't, and often walk right past? And I think part of the secret sauce, if there is a secret sauce here, is training your mind to be able to pay attention to those signals that a lot of times people don't realize the significance of. And so I thought that'd be an interesting place to start the conversation, and just around this idea of what I call trend curation. And I use that word very intentionally because for me, trend curation is about taking pieces of the puzzle from many different places and crafting a story around it, much like a curator in a museum would do that in an exhibit at the museum. So that's my definition for it. But I wonder if maybe one of you could talk about how you define trends and whether you describe what you do as curation, as trend spotting. I mean, there's a lot of terms out there for it. So maybe just give us some of the terms and how you think about that.
Okay, should I go? Or Acacia, you want to go?
Yes, please.
All right. So yeah, at Trendwatching, we call it...
Yeah, please go.
Sorry, I think you're a bit lagging there. So yeah, at Trendwatching, we call it trend spotting, and we define trends broadly as a new manifestation of a fundamental human need, want, or desire. So we always look at innovations. Innovations is our unit of analysis. And then we view it from the lens of, firstly, how does this innovation satisfy our most basic fundamental needs, like the need for security, the need for belonging, the need for status. And then we also look at drivers of change. So what are changing in our world, environment, technology, and all that. And then we ask ourselves very crucially, therefore, what are the new consumer expectations that emerge out of this whole mix? And so that's our trend spotting process in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting because what it elevates trends to is not just saying, oh, well, everyone's going to be using this one social media platform, which is so many times what people diminish trends to be, which is, oh, this platform is taking off and therefore they're going to have a valuation of whatever it is. And so the trend is that more people are going to use the platform. or more people will use the technology, or drones will be delivering more stuff for us. And I know you don't think about trends in terms of those things, and I definitely don't either. I wonder, Acacia, maybe you could talk to us about this idea of layering on human needs and how important that is when you start identifying what the trends are and what the opportunities might be for marketers to think in that way.
Yeah, sure. I think what you mentioned earlier about how we don't look at trends as just something that's coming up and this platform is going to be big, drones is going to be big, because those things are isolated. So if, let's say, you're not in a space that utilizes drones, or you're not in a space where that particular startup is in, you would struggle to think about what the implications for you as a marketer, as a brand would be, because those things are so far removed from your business and what you do for your consumers. But if we think about trends in terms of fundamental human needs, then what you can do is look beyond the obvious signals, look beyond the manifestation of whatever it is that's happening in the market, and you can ask yourself, what does this say about how people are now satisfying their basic human needs? And when you can ask that, it helps you to translate over the insights from that particular thing that you're looking at and apply it to your business and your consumers, because you go deeper. And if you go deeper and look at the basic human needs, hey, guess what? Your consumers are humans too. So this particular insight can apply to you and your consumers as well. So that's one of the biggest importance of why we look at fundamental human needs, and that's how it helps you look at things that might not be very obvious, non-obvious things, and translate it over to whatever you do in your business.
And that's a great way, I think, to move into the main part of our conversation, because I know that no one wants to listen to a talk like this where we vaguely refer to trends but don't actually dig deeper, as you said, into what the real trends are. And so let's get our hands dirty, so to speak, and talk specifically about some trends. And I know that in our conversations preparing for this, we all identified some of the trends from our different pockets of research. And I think one of the things that's really exciting, and this is sort of a first time ever for this event right now, we are putting together minds that have approached cultural trends and insights from totally different places. So I've been working with my team in developing research. You've been working with your teams in developing research, and we haven't necessarily worked together at all. And so this is going to be our first chance to see how the trends that we bring in from our research and your research play to one another, and maybe they agree, maybe they don't agree. We'll find out. This is, I feel like a little bit like a game show host at this point, but
very exciting.
Keep going with that. And the first trend that I wanted to share, and this is one from Non-Obvious Megatrends, which is my latest iteration of my annual book that came out in January. So 2 months before the pandemic kind of basically took over many places around the world, that's when this book came out. And I'm very excited, by the way, because we're talking to an Indian audience. I'm very excited that in December, we're doing an updated version of the book, Non-Obvious Megatrends, that Penguin Random House in India is going to be releasing, and it's going to be fantastic. So if you haven't picked up the book, it's coming to India with a special forward and some bonus content and all sorts of really exciting stuff. So that'll be fantastic. I'm so excited about that. But one of the trends that I wrote about there, which I wanted to start off talking about, is something I called instant knowledge. And instant knowledge was my way of describing this mentality that so many of us have now, that when we don't know something, we can turn immediately to our phone, immediately to YouTube, immediately online, and we can figure it out. Whether it's how to set up the camera for Zoom, or how to get our kids to eat their vegetables, or whatever we have to struggle with, right? Whatever we need to deal with, the knowledge is at our fingertips. And that is such a huge motivator of so many things when it comes to higher education, or how our minds work, or whether people will see the value of doing kind of the traditional college experience versus some other way of learning. So let me throw that out, maybe back to you, Nathania, to talk about this idea of how we learn, how we get information, and how that's perhaps shifting, and whether that resonates with any of the trend work that you've been doing.
Yeah, so it's very fascinating, like you say, Rohit, how like different trend firms, we sort of do our own research, but there's always like such a big overlap in the way we think and view certain things. So when it comes to instant knowledge, definitely, even the reports show from App Annie that there's now a 25% surge in mobile usage in Q3 because everyone's just stuck at home. They're consuming more news. And also because they're anxious, they want to know what's happening, especially related to COVID-19. But I think what's interesting from our perspective is the other side of it, the other side of knowledge consumption. And we have this trend that we call factual healing. And it's about how, because information is like so prevalent around us, it resulted in a society that is polarized, and few truths are actually agreed upon because our social media, our knowledge consumption are actually biased, inherently biased, and sometimes they're also fake as well. And so, it presents like such an urgent opportunity for marketers to tackle this, to be the brand that actually offer truth to consumers out there.
Yeah, I think that it's so interesting that you would put those words together of factual healing, because I think that focusing on fact could be healing. and living in a country where a lot of people kind of make up facts for themselves and don't believe the facts that other people have, even though some things are factual and some things aren't. A lot of Americans, at least, they don't think that way, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating for everyone. Right. And I imagine that's a similar mentality that happens when we start to get to polarization anywhere you go. So that's really interesting. Acacia, I don't know if you want to add anything to that conversation or that kind of piece. I think we have a delay, so I'm not sure if you're hearing me exactly right. So we'll move to the next one, and then I'll give you a chance to jump in. How about that? So okay, let's do. This is, by the way, we're recording this live, and we're crossing continents, right? So I think the signal obviously takes a little bit of time. So we're going to do this is, by the way, this is a teaching moment for everybody who's watching, right? So this is how we're going to test what the delay is. Okay, so Nathania, I'm going to say raise your thumbs up when you hear me say raise your thumb. Okay, you just did the test, right? But and then Acacia, I'll do the same thing, and we'll see what sort of delay we have going there. Okay, so now Nathania, raise your thumb. Okay, down. And now Acacia, raise your thumb. See, you guys saw that, right? Okay, so we've got like a 2-second, like a 1.5 second delay, something like that. So we're gonna make that work. It'll be okay. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. So, like I said, this is live
sorry
recording.
For my feet.
Yes, this is live recording, and we're gonna roll with it. So, so this is like total live broadcast. That's what we're doing right here. Let's shift to kind of a second trend category. And the second trend category that I think is really fascinating is something that I called protective tech. And the way I described it was there's more and more ways that we are using technology to protect ourselves, to protect our environment, and to really protect our culture from one another in some cases. So everything from drones being used in the African safari, in sort of the areas to prevent poachers from killing animals, through to how technology can help to monitor our health signs and vital information to help us get healthier. These are positive examples of protective tech. And then there's sort of the flip side. And one of the interesting things that I want to talk about is that these trends in themselves, a lot of times people think, oh, every trend is going to be like a positive force, right? And actually, not every trend works out that way. Like what trends really are, and my definition for a trend is a curated observation of the accelerating present. Curated observation of the accelerating present. And the observation word is very key, because what it says is we are observing something that's happening. We're not necessarily telling you that it's always positive or always negative. And in fact, in some cases, it could go either way. And protective tech, I think, is one of those examples where, yes, there could be positives like saving species from getting on the endangered list or going extinct. Then there's the potential negative, which is overuse of facial tracking, or certain cities across the world have banned facial tracking because of some of the concerns around that. And these are areas where maybe it goes too far. So this is one for you, Acacia. Let's talk a little bit about the protective nature of technology and whether you see that as something that's going more in the positive direction or more in the negative, or maybe it's kind of in between right now and we don't know yet. So what do you think about that?
The short answer to that is that it's definitely in between right now. Talking about protective tech and how mobile technology is helping keeping people safe, we only have to look at the coronavirus pandemic right now and how in many of the countries that have managed to somewhat contain the virus, one of the biggest tools that the government has been using to keep track of the pandemic is mobile-powered contact tracing. So in Singapore, we have Trace Together. In South Korea, they have an app. In China, they have an app. In many other places in Asia, they have an app. And now I hear from our colleagues and friends in Europe, there are also apps. I'm not sure, Rohit, if you have an app in the US.
We have
tracing.
Yeah, we have this special type of technology that's been pioneered in the US, which is called hopes and prayers. So we don't use science, we don't use facts, and we don't use apps. We just hope that things will be okay. That's the way we do it here. Yeah. Not particularly.
I thought it was legit the name of the platform. Okay, got it. So in Asia, we see a lot of mobile-powered contact tracing apps, and these have helped curb the coronavirus pandemic to a certain extent. Because even in China, for example, they have a system whereby if you were within a 10-meter radius of somebody who was confirmed to test positive for coronavirus, you will get a notification on your phone, and you'll get recommendations as to where you can get yourself tested, or should you self-isolate, or whatever it is. And this is only possible because of the surveillance network that the country already has. So it's one very interesting example to me personally, as I watch over this landscape of how we always talk about how surveillance is bad and you're giving up your privacy and all that. But there are actually case studies in which mobile technology and you giving up your data and you giving up your privacy is a thing that can potentially help save lives. So it's kind of in between right now, because there are clear benefits to it, but there are also very real and very valid concerns about how it's being applied. So one of the themes that we've been tracking in Trendwatching is we always say that you can look at data as like the new tax. It's how modern societies are built upon the taxation system. And no citizen will profess that they love paying taxes. None of us here would say like, oh my God, I really love giving the government this amount of money every year. But we know that taxes make societies work. And if this centuries society is built on taxes, then maybe in the future, future digital connected societies will be built on the idea of data and sharing of your personal data. So in that sense, as a mobile marketer, what does that mean for you? What it means is that you have so much of your consumers' data on your hands, and what do you do with it? Can you give people real value-added benefits? And more importantly, can you also be accountable over consumers' data the way we expect governments to be accountable over taxpayers' money? When you pay tax, you get benefits, and you expect the government to be transparent about it, to be accountable about it. So can you do that for your consumers' personal data as well?
Yeah, and it's interesting because what you're talking about really comes down, I think, to trust, which is when I pay these taxes and when I expect these things, do I trust that my government is going to deliver on those things, or do I think that money is going to be wasted or spent elsewhere, or done, they'll do something else with it, and so much of these elements of the trends that we talk about kind of come down to that expectation, right? They come down to the expectation of like, do I trust the information coming from here? Do I trust what the media is telling me? Do I have any faith in these things? And where do I put my trust? And who do I trust? And I think that that's always been such a fundamental element of marketing in general. I mean, I think that it is very difficult to persuade somebody to buy a service or buy a product or believe something if they don't have trust in those things. And once again, I think we're seeing that coming to the central nature of this in this trend. And so this is just a really, really interesting conversation. I want to shift to one kind of last category, maybe with the remaining time. We're sort of, unfortunately for us, we've got to keep it tight because I know that we're keeping the program rolling. And so we've only got a few minutes left, but I wanted to shift to the commerce side of things and the e-commerce side of things, and specifically a trend that I wrote about, which I called flux commerce. And the way I defined flux commerce was really with two things that I saw happening in the world. The first was that the lines that used to exist between different industries were starting to blur. So what that meant was that, at least here in the US, there were banks that were opening coffee shops. Taco Bell fast food restaurant opened a hotel. Crayola, known for their crayons and markers, started making makeup and moved into fashion. All of these were examples. I mean, Apple launched a credit card. All of these were examples of companies that said, look, we're in this vertical, but now we're going to be in this vertical. And what used to be a very clear drop down, like you just pick your vertical, pick your industry. And now I just pick my industry and that's where I am. But now we're seeing so much more crossover. I mean, healthcare is trying to learn from retail, all of those examples. And so there's something very exciting, I think, about the crossover between industries. And that was one side of what I wrote about there. And the other side was just the shifting of business models and ownership itself. And the idea that, do we need to own something? Can we just share it? Do we need to buy a car? Can we just rent it whenever we want it? Do we get the software and own it? Or do we just pay monthly to access it? And so all of these shifts in ownership and our perception of ownership itself, I think, are really fascinating when it comes to how much of our ownership and how much of our identity gets captured in that mobile device, that device that we're holding in our hands. So for that specific topic, maybe Nathania, you can react to that and just share if that resonates with any of the research that you've been doing or any of the things you've been working on.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's very interesting observation is that, yes, we see in businesses, industries started breaking, people started crossing over verticals. But if you think about it as consumers, we actually never live in industry silos, right? Only brands did or still do. So as consumer, I use Nike shoes, I use clothes from H&M, I use Apple for phone from Apple. So we have the same expectations, and we just want to be served, and we don't really care whether the brands come from various industries. So that's very interesting now that businesses start to grasp that concept and start delivering whatever it is they truly want to satisfy when it comes to basic needs or just their core expertise, and then started transferring it to other verticals where they can actually apply the same concept. And I think especially in Asia, as consumers, we are so used to the concept of super apps anyway. In China, we have WeChat. In Singapore, Grab is trying to be a super app. In Indonesia, we have Gojek. And recently also in India, the biggest telco, Reliance Jio, they just received funding from Facebook, and now they can empower 30 million mom and pop stores, and then you can buy groceries from WhatsApp. So there's all this different new distribution channels, new routes to market, and yeah, like you said, boundary lines between industries just blur even more.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I love all of those examples. I had a really fun time using Gojek when I was in Indonesia to have a couple of things delivered to me on a guy with a scooter, and it was a great experiment and successful too. Really awesome service.
Gojek is a lifesaver.
Yeah, for sure it is. Acacia, anything you maybe can add to that just to give us a little bit more context around it? And then I want to move us to kind of closing out the conversation.
Yeah, sure. In terms of mobile commerce and what you can do with mobile, with all these industry lines blurring, I think what's really blurring is not just the lines between different businesses and different industries, but also between the business and the consumer. So one thing that we are seeing happen, especially in Asia, of course, is social commerce, about how you use mobile-powered social networks to engage consumers better. And with social commerce, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that, okay, let's sell on Instagram, let's sell on social media platforms, put a buy now button on your social media post, basically. But what we're really seeing is that it goes more than that. What we're seeing is that brands are starting to jump onto social platforms to build genuine communities or engage existing communities on social platforms. And then what you can do is that either your community actually generates transactions for you, or you cultivate a relationship with your consumers on these social platforms, and then that generates a lot of value for your brands. So that's also one thing that mobile marketers can definitely look at, the opportunity of how you can jump onto social platforms to engage consumers, not just in a, hey, look at my newest post kind of way, but also in a more meaningful way. How do you engage them, build relationships, ask them for feedback, truly have conversations with them, and then that will generate a lot of value for the brand as well.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I feel like we could go for quite a while on this conversation, and I'm really sorry we have to cut it short. But I want to thank you, first of all, both of you, for agreeing to navigate the time zone differences and for joining me from across the world. I think we managed to make the slight delay not too bad. I think it was a great experience, hopefully for people who are watching right now. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to both of you. If any of the trend research that both Nathania and Acacia shared was fascinating for you, I highly recommend visiting trendwatching.com to check out more of that research. And there's just so much insight there that I highly recommend. So thank you to both of you for being part of this. I also want to remind everyone that if you do want to dig more into some of the trends that I shared with non-obvious megatrends, the new version, the Indian version of the book, which was a #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller and a USA Today bestseller here in the US, is going to be coming out in December, specifically in India, distributed by Penguin Random House. So it should be everywhere. We're very excited about the launch. The cover is going to be slightly different. We've got some different endorsements and things there. We've got a different introduction to the book, which is written since the COVID pandemic. So some updated content there. Very useful stuff. So definitely check that out. And if you want to get a short excerpt from that book, there is a special URL that we have set up for you, which is nonobvious.com/MMA. And if you visit that URL, you will be able to download an excerpt from that, as well as lots of other materials. And you can see a bonus video with me sharing kind of more of the methodology and a time-lapse video of the trend curation process, which is really fun to share. So lots and lots of resources there. I will also include the links and details for both of my fellow panelists on this URL also. So I highly recommend you check that out too. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, for listening to our conversation about trends. I have had a fantastic time having both of you, Nathania and Acacia. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And I hope that everyone who's listening connects with both of you and connects with me. So thank you.
Thanks, Rohit.